you. Nobody's here for me. They're all here for you. I usually get like 3 people. And, all of a sudden, all these people here. I mean, this is amazing. No, I get more than 3, to be honest. But Uncle Dale and his power stash are here. Thank you, Dale. I got your photos. Thank you so much. Paul Holland, good morning. Lee, thanks for joining us. My brother Eugene in Philly, who I think is still in L.A. How are you, my friend? Northern UFOs, good to have you here. And Anita Torres, looking lovely tonight. Thank you for joining us. Mr. Catfish, welcome to the channel. And I think we're caught up. So we're going to get going here in about 30 seconds. The awesome living legend in the UFO world, Kathleen Martin. She's going to open us up to some seriously good stuff tonight. And a good way to support this show, everyone, is by hitting that thumbs up button, by hitting that subscribe button. If you are new to our channel, we really do appreciate it. Hi, Thurston Howell III. And, make sure that if you want, the super chat is open. Ronnie Little, welcome. Thank you for joining us. We're going to get going here in about 5 seconds. I hope you enjoyed tonight's show. I know I am. Oob, Joe, you've got aliens. Here we go. From the mountains of central British Columbia to you listening around the world, this, my friends, is Spaced Out Radio. I am your host, Dave Scott, sitting in the captain's chair of SOR headquarters. We welcome you to tonight's show on our terrestrial affiliates around North America, digitally on TalkStream Live, Revolution Radio, and KPNL. If you want to take a listen to our archives, they are free for you by going to youtube.com/Spaced Out Radio. Just do me the favor, hit that subscribe button. You can follow us on Twitter at Spaced Out Radio and on Instagram at Spaced Out Radio Show. Our website is spacedoutradio.com, where we have a plethora of features for you, including rocking out to Bumblefoot and reading up on Captain Shirk's SOR Newswire. Tonight's show is brought to you by Chive Charities. Help make the world 10% happier by visiting Chive Charities today. You can find them on our website. You know, it isn't very often where we could say we have a legend in the UFO world coming on this show. The reason why is, really today, there are so few. But here, we have one in Kathleen Martin. Barney and Betty Hill were an American couple who were claimed to have had an alien abduction by extraterrestrials in a rural portion of the state of New Hampshire from September 19th to 20th in 1961. It was first widely publicized report of an alien abduction in the United States. The incident became known as the Hill abduction because the couple stated they had been kidnapped by aliens who claimed to have been from the Zeta Reticuli system. Now, years later, decades later, their niece, Kathleen Martin, celebrates their story and the anniversary of their abduction. Then at the bottom of hour number 3, I will bring you the SOR Newswire, brought to you by Paranoia Magazine. Kathleen Martin, it is such a privilege and an honor to have you on Spaced Out Radio once again. Thank you so much for staying up late and joining our audience.
Well, thank you, Dave, and it's nice to be back with you.
It's very nice. I'm humbled, and I'll be honest with you, I'm a little, every time you're on, I kind of stumble through my words because I'm nervous. I'm nervous, you know.
Don't be nervous about me.
You're like the Lemieux to Gretzky, you know, in hockey, to use a hockey term. So I'm just, you know, I get that way every now and again. I'm human. What am I supposed to do? But Kathleen, thank you so much. And, you know, it's such an honor to have you on the show because, I mean, you are someone who has been involved with MUFON for a number of years. You've been very much involved in helping people with ET abductions. You had to grow up with this subject, you know, in your family with Mr. and Mrs. Hill. And everything that you went through, did you ever think, looking back on it now, that this would have been your life's path?
I would never have dreamed that it would be my life's path. And in fact, I was well aware of my aunt and uncle's experience. I was 13 years old when it happened. And Betty called my mother, who was her younger sister. when they had arrived home and taken long showers and had something to eat, and then they drew pictures of the UFOs that they saw. It was a single UFO that they saw, and went to bed. And when they woke up, Betty phoned my mother. She was very concerned that Barney might have been contaminated, and perhaps her too, but it was Barney who went out and stood in a field looking up at this craft that was hovering only about 100 feet overhead and descending even lower. And so she wanted advice from a neighbor of ours. So that's how it all started for me. But then, I went through high school and through college, and I studied to be a social worker and studied social science because I was always more academically oriented than carrying out the practical end of anything. But I ended up teaching school. My first husband and I moved to Cincinnati, Ohio after college. And he was studying for his doctorate in the philosophy of psychiatry. So I did graduate work there while I was teaching, because in those days it was the wife's responsibility to support the husband while he went through. And then when he was employed as a college professor, probably, then he would support the wife in going through college. But I didn't complete it because I ended up getting divorced and moving away. So I taught school for many years, and then I moved back to New Hampshire. And when I was in New Hampshire, I was watching television shows about Betty's and Barney's experience, reading newspaper articles, and that sort of thing. And the information that was given was different from what I remembered. And I thought, am I just remembering this incorrectly? I need to check into this. So I decided that since I was leaving the field of education, I wasn't feeling well. I had been diagnosed with a disease that was fairly long-term, but I had a miraculous healing about 12 years ago. But anyway, I decided that I would investigate my aunt and uncle's experience myself to find out what was the truth, to separate fact from fiction, and not only to investigate by driving along the entire route that they took from Niagara Falls up through Toronto, stopping 112 miles west of Montreal, and then spending a lovely afternoon as tourists in Montreal, expecting that they would spend the night at the outskirts of the city because they had a dog and they couldn't take their dog into the big hotels downtown. But as they were driving out to look for a motel, Barney lost his way, and they ended up on the highway that would take them back through Vermont and into New Hampshire. So they decided that they would continue on their vacation. They visited another small, wonderful resort town along the way, stopped and ate a couple of times, and entered New Hampshire about probably 9 to 9:30 at night. They went into a restaurant, had something to eat, a cup of coffee, knowing that probably nothing would be open for the remainder of the night as they moved into less populated areas. So that's how it all started. And they were driving south of Lancaster, New Hampshire, just maybe 45 minutes to an hour south of Colebrook, where they had stopped for coffee. And they left at 10:05, and they were just south of Lancaster when Betty spotted a new light in the sky. And she had never seen a satellite. She knew that it didn't move like a falling star. It was traveling upward. And so she continued to watch it. It was a light, bright night. Barney was driving. The road was very visible, so he could drive about 50 miles an hour, he said. And they anticipated that they would arrive home at between 2 and 3 o'clock in the morning. So, would you like me just to continue on?
Oh, please. I'm already lost in your story. No, please. I mean, I think for our people who are listening, not only in our chat rooms, but on our radio stations around North America, for a lot of people, Kathleen, this may be the first time they're hearing it. So please just let us all get lost in your voice.
Okay, I'll do that. So they continued driving south, and this craft was moving in closer and closer. And I want to say that my Uncle Barney was more than a skeptic. He did not believe that it was possible for extraterrestrial craft to be traveling to our Earth. And he just thought the whole thing was nonsense. And Betty wasn't certain about that, but as this craft moved in closer and closer, she became more and more interested. And they were just north of an area called Franconia Notch. It's a beautiful tourist area, very scenic with no attractions. It's undeveloped through Franconia Notch. And just north of Franconia Notch, Betty wanted to stop. And Barney said, well, I want to get home, Betty. I've been driving and, I want to get home on time and go to bed. And so Betty said, well, I have to walk our dog, Delcy. I think she has to use the bathroom. And so that caused Barney to find a picnic area at the Mount Cleveland picnic area, which is about 4 miles north of Franconia Notch. And they stopped there and got out of the car. Barney at that point took a gun out of the trunk of the car, not because he feared the craft, but because he was walking the dog at a picnic area at night and there were bears in the area. So he thought he would shoot the gun off into the air if a bear came out of the woods to scare that bear away. Well, Betty took the binoculars and was looking up at this craft that seemed to be flashing multicolored lights and traveled across the face of the moon. And then Barney came out and grabbed the binoculars and said, oh, Betty, it's only a conventional aircraft. Forget about it. Get back into the car. They headed south. And as they entered Franconia Notch, this craft was now ahead of them and passed over Cannon Mountain, which is a ski area at the north end of Franconia Notch. And Betty noticed that as it passed over a lighted building at the top of that mountain, the lights blinked out. So she thought, well, maybe they were just turning off the lights. But it could have also been that they didn't stay open until, say, 11:30 at night. They actually were on all night and blinked out due to magnetic interference. So they then became more interested because the craft was coming lower. So Barney decided to stop the car again at the Old Man of the Mountain. And the Old Man of the Mountain was New Hampshire's state symbol. And it would have been about 11:35 when they made this second stop. And the Old Man was 48 feet from forehead to chin. And they noticed that craft was at least 1.5 times the length of the Old Man's profile, or maybe even 2 times that length. It appeared to be cigar-shaped, but it appeared to be rotating as well, because they could see that it was lighted on one side as it was rotating. So they got back into the car, and they're watching this craft as it's traveling in a zigzag pattern, a stair-step pattern, unconventional pattern. And Betty is becoming more and more interested in this. Barney is looking for a police officer to report this thing to. And they exit the south entrance of Franconia Notch, and this is where the motels, the cabins in those days were, the tourist attractions, Clark's Trained Bears at Clark's Trading Post. There was a place called Natureland where people could take their children, that sort of thing. And so they're looking for another place to pull off beside the road to get another look at this craft. And before they could do that, this craft swooped ahead and stopped above the highway. The car would have been directly underneath it if Barney had not pulled into the center of the highway. So it was extending on the driver's, or on the side of the highway that he was driving on, and beyond that, onto the land beyond that. And if Barney stopped the car at that point, so he would not drive under this craft, and opened his door, got out. He had his binoculars in his hand, and he held the binoculars up to his eyes, and he could see what he described as appearing to be a giant pancake that was just hanging there in the air, silent, hovering. And he stepped back away from the car, and when he did, that giant pancake traveled to an adjacent field toward the east. It would have been toward Barney's left. And he followed it into the field. And he put the binoculars to his eyes. It had now descended to about 100 feet. And he was looking at it. He'd put the binoculars to his eyes and see what he saw. And then he would shake his head and pull the binoculars down and say, "It can't be. It can't be." And put the binoculars back up and pinch himself to make sure he wasn't dreaming. He was really having a moment of cognitive dissonance then. And this craft was just there, clear as a bell, and he, through his binoculars, saw through this lighted row of windows figures. And those figures were humanoid in shape, meaning that they had a head, a body, arms and legs, 2 arms, 2 legs, 2 eyes, hands, and they were dressed in black, shiny uniforms. And suddenly, all except for one moved away from the window to what appeared to be a panel on the back of the hallway that seemed to encircle the front part of this brilliantly lighted craft. And he is looking now at one standing at the window. And he was looking at this craft, and little red lights started to slide out on like little fins, and then something started to drop down at the bottom, from the bottom of the craft, that he thought might be a rope, but then no, it wasn't actually a rope. He couldn't identify what it was. Today, we know that that is the beam that extends down from the bottom of the craft that is like a carrier beam. And the non-human entities just travel down that beam. They capture that human and take them onto the beam and back up into the craft. So Barney was correct when he sensed that he was going to be captured like, quote, a bug in a net close quote, and he became terrified. He knew that there was a plan for him, and he was going to get back to the car and outrun that craft. So he went screaming back to the car to Betty that they had to get out of there or they were going to be captured. And as he entered the car, he noticed that the craft was now moving in his direction. He went speeding down the highway. He'd left the car running and told Betty to roll up down the window and look up and see if she could see the lights on the craft. Well, she rolled down the window and all she saw was blackness, no lights. All she saw was blackness, even though it was a bright light night. And she rolled the window up and she said, "No, Barney, I don't see the lights." And within moments, they heard a series of code-like buzzing sounds that were striking the trunk of their car.
Oh, weird.
It caused their car, it was a 1957 Chevy Bel Air, two-tone, blue and white, caused that car to vibrate and for a tingling sensation to pass through Betty's and Barney's bodies. The next thing they knew, they were 35 miles down the highway with very spotty memories of what had happened in the interim. They remembered finding themselves on a dirt road with tall trees all around, not on the highway any longer. They remembered a roadblock, but they didn't know where or when that occurred. And they remembered a fiery orb, a large fiery orb that appeared to be sitting on the ground. And then they heard a series of buzzing sounds again. And when that occurred, they looked but didn't see the craft this time. And Betty said to Barney, "Now do you believe in flying saucers?" And he said, "Oh, Betty, don't be ridiculous. There's no such thing as flying saucers. I'll prove to you that I can make those sounds." So he stopped the car. He drove from one side of the road to the other. And to Betty's delight, he could not make that sound. He could not reproduce it. So they just drove on to their home on New Hampshire's seacoast, Portsmouth, New Hampshire. They had been looking for a highway patrolman. They'd been looking for a cup of coffee. They couldn't find either along the way. And they arrived home and got out of the car. Betty walked the dog. Barney went into the house and into the bathroom. They both noticed that it was now 5:15, not between 2 and 3 o'clock in the morning. And when Barney went into the bathroom, he noticed that his shoe was untied. He put his shoe up to tie up the lace, and he noticed that his shoe was deeply scraped. In fact, both toes of his shoes were so deeply scraped that he had to purchase new shoes. He was a meticulous dresser. He had pain in the area of his neck and his shoulders. He felt that he had been touched by something. He felt dirty. He and Betty both said they felt clammy. Betty walked the dog, and she went into the house and said to Barney, "If you get the suitcases and the things from the trunk of the car, don't bring them into the house. They might be contaminated." That craft was so low. So they ended up taking long showers. Mm-hmm. And I've already told you that part.
I gotta tell you, as we only got about 20 seconds left here before we go to break, I am just shivering right now in anticipation. You tell this story so good, and it's true,
thank you.
And it's amazing.
Yes.
And we're going to get more into that because we got to get in depth with this. And Kathleen Marden, legend in this field when it comes to UFOs, alien abduction, her aunt and uncle, Betty and Barney Hill. We're going to get right into it when we come back from the break. We're going to hear more of the Betty and Barney Hill story with Kathleen Marsden coming up here on Spaced Out Radio. All right, we are clear.
Okay.
All right. This is so exciting. So exciting.
You know, it was very exciting to me as a child, 13 years old.
Oh, man.
And hearing about the experience that my aunt and uncle had. I didn't even think it was possible. In school, we were told that we were the only inhabited planet in our solar system, and I certainly wasn't thinking about our galaxy. I was limited to the solar system at that point.
Oh, tell me about it. Tell me about it. And it is just so creepy. And we're going to ask some in-depth questions here too, coming up here. But I just want you to get the story out because it's just so impactful. I mean, what is this now? 60 years? Since
this is, 60 years.
Holy cow.
Since this occurred.
Wow.
It's hard to believe I'm that old.
You don't look it. You don't look
well,
it.
Well, thank you. No, I have good tissue. That's what my doctor says. Both of my grandmothers lived to be nearly 100.
Oh, so, wow.
Yes. Long livers in the family.
Holy cow, that's awesome. That is awesome.
Mm-hmm.
I know with my own experiences, I know what you're saying. Like, Dr. Bob McGuire.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Him and I got taken 3 weeks ago.
You did?
Yeah.
Wow.
I went to bed after the show, and I literally, I was in this hotel, this dark, dreary hotel, and Bob was there. A few other ufologists were there that I didn't know, or I knew who they were in the dream, but I can't remember who they are. One was Olaf Phillips, and there were three gray guys. Two were tag teamed together, and one was on his own. They were just kind of running around this, what I thought was a hotel. Woke up the next morning, felt like I was awake all night. Literally, my body ached. Everything was sore. It was like a $3 hangover.
Wow.
I mean, a 3 day, pardon me, not $3, 3 day hangover. And I called up Bob that morning when I was on my way, because I have a daytime job as well. I called him up and I said, Bob, how'd you sleep last night? And he goes, well, I was tossing and turning, and I didn't have that good of a sleep. And his wife Sharon got up because she had heard things walking downstairs in their house. And I said, well, I got taken last night and you were there. And he went, what? I said, yeah. So after we hung up the phone, long story short, he ended up checking his Fitbit. Mm-hmm. And his Fitbit said that he was awake for 90 minutes in the middle of the night. And the GPS on his Fitbit was that he was not registering on the planet. Uh-huh.
Yeah, those Fitbits are pretty good. That, they can show that a person has walked like 1,000 stairs when there aren't any stairs in their home when they're taken.
I hear you. We've got about 1 minute here. And hi, George Hernandez. How are you? I want to say a big thank you to Fabster ×2, the gorgeous Kira, UFO Garage, Mr. Catfish ×2, Sinister Shorts, Ash Dobbs, Brett Lewis, and Eric for these amazing super chats. Amazing super chats tonight. You guys are awesome. Way too kind. All because you feel bad I shaved my beard. I mean, thank you. But wow. Amazing. Thank you guys so much. Really do appreciate the love. Really do. Yeah, it's have you ever been taken?
Have I?
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, cool. So, all right, we'll get into that in a little bit. I wasn't sure if you were or not. I thought you were, but I wasn't sure if you were one of us. Wasn't sure. Are you one of us weirdos? Sure.
Yeah, I wasn't happy about it, but
yeah, I know the
it
feeling.
Happened.
I know the feeling. I'm still waiting for my. I've pretty much laid down the law that I don't want them taking me at night, but they don't seem to listen. I just take me. I'm more than willing to go. But give me a little bit of a warning. Like, take me during the day. Take me while I'm awake. I'm fine with that. Let's just go. Mm-hmm. We got 10 seconds here. Thank you to everyone who is tuning on in. Thank you for everyone who is subscribed. Here we go with the second half hour. Second half hour of Spaced Out Radio is now underway. My name is Dave Scott. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us. We really do appreciate earning your listening ears. We want to remind you that if you miss portions of this show or others, check out our free archives by going to youtube.com/Spaced Out Radio. Just do me the favor, hit that subscribe button. Our website is spacedoutradio.com, where we have a plethora of features for you, including rocking out to Bumblefoot and reading up on Captain Shirk's SOR Newswire. Follow us on Twitter at Spaced Out Radio and on Instagram at Spaced Out Radio Show. It's the anniversary, 60 years since Betty and Barney Hill were abducted by extraterrestrials while driving on the American East Coast. Their niece, Kathleen Martin, is here tonight. She is one of the greatest legends in ufology as far as I'm concerned, and we are so lucky to have her here. Kathleen, welcome back.
Thank you. Great to be back.
I hope you don't get insulted by the amount of times I'm going to call you legend tonight.
I don't consider that to be an insult. It's a compliment.
Well,
Thank you.
Good. Kathleen, in the first half hour, you really went into detail about the experience that Uncle Barney and Aunt Betty had for you, and what they went through. I'm still amazed by it, because even though I've heard it numerous times, it still hits me the same way, like I'm hearing it for the first time each and every time. For you as a family, when they came to you guys and said, this is what happened, why did you believe them?
Betty and Barney were not people who would joke around and with that sort of thing. Betty and Barney were very involved in community affairs. They were involved in the civil rights movement. They were an interracial couple married in 1960 after a 4-year courtship. And they would not joke around about something like that. Plus, they were really concerned that they had been contaminated. They took long showers. Betty phoned my mother and asked her to call our neighbor who was a physicist. And I was home from school. My mother called that physicist. And he told my mother that if Betty had a compass, to tell her to go out to the car to see how the needle reacted. Betty was fearful of radiation. Now, that's not going to measure radiation, but it will measure a magnetic field. And so Betty found a compass. Barney's saying, Betty, forget about it. Betty, don't tell anyone about this. No good can ever come of it. And so she went to the car and found those shiny spots on the trunk of the car that hadn't been there the day before. And she held the compass over them, and the needle whirled. But when she started at another part of the car, the needle dropped down. So there was a magnetic field around the trunk of that vehicle. And we found these magnetic fields around other vehicles that have been where people have been taken in MUFON investigations. So that's what happened, apparently, and I wouldn't doubt that they picked that car up. That's just speculation on my part, but I kind of think there was a problem that in the testimony, because under hypnosis, I'm kind of jumping ahead, but under hypnosis, Barney said, well, I'm driving, and I make a turn, and I don't know why I had to make that turn. Well, Barney did not make that turn off from the highway they had been traveling on. You can't get to that place by making one turn. And so that car was moved to another location. But getting back to what happened, my family was very interested and we were very concerned too. We wanted to see those spots on the car. And so within 2 days, we went down to Betty's and Barney's house. And we did see the spots on the car. We heard Betty, who was describing everything they saw and how her dress was torn. But I didn't see the dress at that time. She'd already put it into her closet. The tops of Barney's dress shoes, they were so deeply scraped. The watches that would not work, Betty handed me a watch and said, see if you can make this work. I'll never forget it, even though I was 13, because it was such a shocking event. It was like imprinted into my brain. And because I couldn't make her watch run. It never ran again. It was a wind-up watch, and probably the magnetic field sprung the spring in the watch. It did that to that type of watch. And it was very, very interesting to me, a little bit frightening, I would say. My mother had told Betty and Barney to call Pease Air Force Base because my father's best friend was a police officer, and he stopped by the house every night on his way home from work. He worked days as a machinist, and on his part-time, it was a tiny town, so they didn't have full-time police officers in those days. He had been the chief of police, and he said that Pease Air Force Base in Newington, New Hampshire, had notified the police station that if anyone saw a flying saucer, they should report it to Pease. So based upon what he told my mother, she told Betty and Barney, and they called Pease Air Force Base. When we arrived at their house, Barney was sitting just waiting for the base to call back. They had made the report the night before, but there was some interesting information in that report, and the officer, Henderson, wanted to speak with Barney about that. They had actually picked up an unknown craft on radar, according to the report. So it could have been a coincidence at that time. I'm convinced it wasn't, because there were 2 radar stations that picked up craft.
Kathleen, may I butt in and ask a question, if you don't mind?
Oh, certainly. Yes.
Betty and Barney seem to detail a lot of this. And the way you're explaining it, I mean, it's so accurate. It's so precise about the spots on the car, about the radiation. Why did they want to document this as much as they did? Because, I mean, for many abductees out there, they just roll with the experience. They're not interested in radiation. They're not interested in time lapses or lack of sleep or wearing someone else's clothes. You know, we're not taking those photos or anything. Why did they go the opposite direction?
Well, first of all, this was 1961. And as far as we knew, no one had ever been abducted in the United States or anywhere else. And so our friend, the police officer, Buzz, had told them to contact Pease Air Force Base, and they were good citizens. I mean, Betty was a social worker for the state of New Hampshire. Barney worked for the post office. They were behaving in a proper manner. And when they were told that that's what the Air Force wanted, they made the report. The base was just the next town over from where they lived. And then Betty had never read a book. She knew nothing about flying saucers. And so except for in sci-fi movies, but she didn't even watch sci-fi movies. She'd heard about them. But anyway, she went to the Portsmouth Public Library and took the first book she had ever read on that topic out of the library. And it was written by Major Donald Kehoe, who had been a military officer, who was now the civilian director of the National Investigations Committee on Aerial Phenomena. And there was an address inside and a request that if anyone had a sighting, they should report it to NICAP. So, again, being good citizens, she was the typist of the family. She and Barney sat down and wrote a letter. And thank goodness that they had documented all of this. In the letter, she talked about the erratic pattern that the craft flew in, a stair-step pattern, a zigzag pattern, and had talked also about those strange figures on board that craft, that completely silent craft that Barney was so frightened of. She had written they were dressed in black, shiny uniforms, and that Barney had developed a mental block about what their faces actually looked like. And she and Barney were both interested in hypnosis to see if they could help Barney to uncover what those faces looked like. So a lot of it was that Betty, like me, since I'm related to her, was very, very curious. We want answers when there is something perplexing. And so they made that report. The NICAP sent their investigator from that area, Walter Webb, who was an astronomer from the Hayden Planetarium in Boston, up to Portsmouth, New Hampshire, to interview Betty and Barney separately and then together for a period of about 6 hours. He forgot to look at the spots on the trunk of the car or to test it with a compass, but he took a report about everything they remembered, which is very good because in it Barney said that those entities were somehow not human. And that, again, dressed in black, shiny uniforms, and how they moved in unison the way military officers would, and found that very perplexing. And so, they made these reports 2 months later to other people from NICAP. A couple of scientists from IBM went up and interviewed Betty and Barney, and again went through the route that they had taken. And they went 191 miles in 7 hours. You don't do that when you're driving at 50 miles per hour, even if you make a couple of stops. And so it really began to bother Barney especially, that there was this missing time. There was all this evidence. And Holman and Jackson, being scientists, and Walter Webb being a scientist, really were so interested in what had happened. And Betty and Barney were then driving up to the White Mountains along that route, looking for that dirt road, looking for the place where there were tall trees all around, where they encountered that roadblock. And so they would make weekend trips up there, and then weird things started to happen when they arrived home. Something or someone had entered their home, and they went in. It was now dark outside, turned on the light, and there on their dining room table were dried, brown, withered leaves. And Barney must have been really shocked at that. They certainly didn't put them in there. He picked up the leaves to throw them away, and the earrings that Betty had been wearing that night fell out of those leaves.
Really?
Yes, the night that they were abducted. And she hadn't even noticed that when she arrived home, she didn't have her earrings. But apparently they forgot to give them back to her, and maybe it was them who delivered them at the house somehow.
Could it have been that when they were abducted, they were taken home and then back?
I don't think they were taken home. I suspect that they might have been taken under water, under the Atlantic Ocean, off the coast of New Hampshire and Maine. The reason I suspect that is that Barney made a statement that has never been publicized. But he said, do they go underwater? Now, Betty thought that they might have just remained on that one spot where they were taken. But I know for a fact that many, many people see these craft coming up out of deep bodies of water and going down again. They could just take them over to wherever they were going and have done the exams under the water. They then knew that there wouldn't be human interference in any way. And that's just speculation. It's just fun to kind of speculate about what did happen. Betty and Barney were just on the craft undergoing physical exams, so they will never know for certain. But the craft that Pease Air Force recorded on radar at 2:14 a.m. was seen coming in from the east, from the Atlantic Ocean, and traveling toward the west. And I spoke to a man who was in the Navy at that time. He and his friend would go down to Portland, Maine, to visit a girlfriend the night that Betty and Barney were returning home. And they saw a craft that night, very low in the sky, headed toward Lincoln, New Hampshire, toward that area. So there are people who have since reported to me that they observed something. A man who had retired from the Air Force called me a few years ago and told me that he was in the control tower at Pease Air Force Base and saw a UFO. I am not certain if it was on that night. I wish I had recorded his statement and documented his statement. I didn't at that time. But people have talked about this so many times. And all of the time we seem to be receiving more information from the physical evidence and also from individuals who are still alive, who have now retired and don't mind talking about it because they couldn't lose their jobs at this point. So things are still occurring. And in the 60th anniversary edition of Captured, the Betty and Barney Hill UFO Experience, which is being released today, you can get it today, that there is new evidence. I wrote a new chapter on Stanton Friedman at the beginning of the book, and at the end of the book, I have a new chapter on all of the scientific evidence that has been evaluated from the time the first book was published until now. So a period of 13, 14 years. And there is some very, very interesting evidence in that book. I can't tell you what it is. I'll give you one hint, though, of only one thing. I have spoken about this before. There is a lot of evidence, including an update on the star map. But Uh, Stanton T. Friedman, my co-author, with whom I worked for 14 years. We wrote 3 books together. He lived in New Brunswick in Fredericton, and during his investigation back in the late 1970s, had written to the Boston newspaper reporter, John Luttrell. Now, why did he write to John Luttrell? Because Betty and Barney had never intended to have their story go public. They didn't want it to. They were involved in the civil rights movement. As an interracial couple, they did not want to bring attention to themselves. With the jobs that they had working for the government, they feared that they could lose their jobs. And so a friend of Betty's finally, in 1965, spilled the beans and told this newspaper reporter what had happened. And this friend of Betty's knew what Betty and Barney had said. She was sworn to secrecy like the rest of us. And she didn't maintain confidentiality. And the story was brought forth for 5 days in the Boston Traveler. That story spread all over the country, all around the world. At that time, Barney had received a commendation, an award from Sergeant Shriver, who was the head of the U.S. government's poverty program, because Betty and Barney had worked to set up the Rockingham County, New Hampshire Community Action Program with funding from the Office of Economic Opportunity. This was a major achievement. Barney was the first chairman of the board of directors. Barney had been elected to serve on the U.S. Commission on Civil Rights as a representative from the state of New Hampshire. They were very politically involved. They had campaigned for Lyndon Johnson and received an invitation to Lyndon Johnson's inauguration. And they went, and since I was their niece and they had encouraged me always to do good things and follow in their footsteps, I campaigned as little as I could as a high school student, talking to other students and telling them to talk to their parents and that sort of thing. I also received an invitation, and Betty and Barney and I attended all of the inaugural events. It was, the time of my life to go to a presidential inauguration, to all of the parties, the balls, the dinners, and I'll never forget that. And that was what Betty and Barney had to lose. Yes.
Amazing. I mean, we're only about a minute away here from where we go to break here at the top of the hour. Kathleen, I mean, the fact that everything just all of a sudden took off for them, was it to keep them quiet, keep their story out of the public, or was it something that the government officials wanted to kind of show them off? An interracial couple, amazing experience. How did that work?
The federal government definitely did not want that story made public, but it was. And there was a psychological operation that began with Betty and Barney. There were government disinformants who came forward to try to destroy that story and to attack the credibility of Betty and Barney. So it wasn't good. Fortunately, they didn't lose their jobs. But Barney wasn't reelected to the U.S. Civil Rights Commission when his appointment time was up. You know, it was bad. It was not good for them. They were distressed.
Well, let's hold that until we get back with hour number 2. Kathleen Marden, legend in the UFO field, chatting with us on the anniversary of Betty and Barney Hill. Her brand new book on the story, launched today. That's what we love on this show, is when books launch, when we have the guest on. Kathleen Martin returns right after this. All right, I will just run out, take my dogs out. I'll be right back in a couple minutes, okay?
Okay, and I will get a glass of water.
Sure. Perfect.
Faceless organization collecting money for a nebulous cause. Our donor dollars go directly toward life-improving items. Then we give those items directly to an underdog who needs it most. To become a donor with Spaced Out Radio's official charity, Chive Charities, just go to chivecharities.org/donate.
For the price of 1 cup of coffee a month, you can become an SOR Space Traveler. The Space Travelers Club is a place where you can interact with other listeners, either live during the show or on our great forum. We want your stories, pictures, comments, and ideas. You'll get live video streams, exclusive content, and be a part of our newsletter. Stay in touch with everything SOR. The Space Travelers Club is just $5 a month at spacedoutradio.com.
Hi, this is Amber Beckrud, and I want to invite you to subscribe to our YouTube channel where we store all of the SOR show archives for free. And as an added bonus, every 2 weeks I'm posting brand new content on Cryptid Tales, where I will get into some of the spookier legends and folklore from around the world and tell the stories that go with them. Find us at youtube.com/spacedoutradio and check out Cryptid Tales today. Drop a comment and let me know what you want to hear. See you there.
Hello, Space Travelers. It's me again, Carl. Don't forget to join the Space Travelers Club for just $5 a month and follow Spaced Out Radio on Twitter at Spaced Out Radio. Our Instagram, Dave Scott SOR. Our Facebook page is Spaced Out Radio Show. Our archives are free at youtube.com/Spaced Out Radio. Come woo it up with Spaced Out Radio today. Bye!
Are you intrigued by Paranormal Talk Radio? You'll love the new Paranormal Radio app from TalkStream Live. You'll find a great selection of talk shows covering UFOs, ghosts, strange phenomena, and much more. Download the Paranormal Radio app now and start listening to the very best in paranormal talk entertainment, including the network you're listening to right now, the Paranormal Radio app, free in Google Play and the iOS App Store.
Are you an experiencer of something strange that can't be explained? Do you want help finding out what's going on? I'm Ryan Stacy, head of the Experiencer Support Association, otherwise known as TESA. We've teamed up with Spaced Out Radio to investigate cases filled out in the SOR Sightlines report. We are independent and there's no cost to what we do. All we need is your experience. Let's find out what's happening together on the SOR Sightlines report.
The party is always on at the Moose Vancouver. The Moose Vancouver is where you want to be when visiting Canada's West Coast. Open until 2 a.m. nightly, the Moose cranks up the rock while serving some of the best rated food in the city. The menu starts at $6.95. Why party anywhere else in Vancouver when the Moose is right there? Get your horns up and rock with the Moose, the official party bar of Spaced Out Radio.
The SOR Vault is open for business, and do we have some cool swag for you to pick up? All you have to do is head over to our website and click on the SOR Vault. You have a variety of cool logos to choose from, and put them on anything you want. T-shirts, hoodies, hats, coffee mugs, you name it, we can get it to you. So do your shopping by supporting the store you love. Get your Spaced Out Radio swag at the SOR Vault today.
Get your horns up with me on Spaced Out Radio. This is Ron Bumblefoot Thal. Come tune in to SOR where you can hear me rock.
I am back. Hey, Polar Eclipse, how you doing? Welcome back. Who else do we have in here? Oh, hey, Clam. Very cool. Very cool. Kathleen, we've got about just under 2 minutes left.
Okay.
I'm so excited right now. This is such awesome radio. Such awesome radio. All right. We have just under a minute. Do you ever get sick of talking about this?
Sometimes if I have 3 shows in the same day,
Yeah.
then it's a little wearing, and I'm always trying to think of rewording it differently, just to amuse myself, probably.
I can imagine.
Yeah.
I can imagine.
Why not?
I can totally imagine. I mean, gee whiz. Gee whiz. All right, we have about 45 seconds. I want to say thank you so much to Mr. Catfish for numerous super chats. Dirty Filth, Fapster for a couple, Gorgeous Kira, Ben from UFO Garage, Sinister Shorts, Ash Dobbs, Brett Lewis, and Eric. Thank you so much for the love and support of Spaced Out Radio. It's a great way to support what we do on this show on a nightly basis, as we work hard here for you, and we try and bring you top-notch guests. You could thank Corrence, the booking guy, for that. And, we're going to get going here in about 5 seconds. Remember to, if you're new, to hit that thumbs up, hit that subscribe button. We'd really appreciate it. Here we go.
You're listening to Spaced Out Radio with Dave Scott. Follow Dave on Twitter at Spaced Out Radio and on Facebook, Spaced Out Radio Show.
Hour number 2 of Spaced Out Radio is now underway. My name is Dave Scott. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us. We really do appreciate earning your listening ears. Hello to everyone listening in on our terrestrial affiliates around North America, digitally on TalkStream Live, Revolution Radio, and KPNL. All of our archives are free by going to youtube.com/Spaced Out Radio. Just do old Davey the favor, hit that subscribe button. The Desert Clam has set the password for tonight in the SOR Space Travelers Club. What do you got for us, Clam? Lacanoscopy. Lacanoscopy is your password. Use it wisely, space travelers, as the Clam sets the password each and every night right here on Spaced Out Radio. Our website is spacedoutradio.com, where we have a plethora of features for you, including rocking out to Bumblefoot and reading up on Captain Shirk's SOR Newswire. Follow us on Twitter at Spaced Out Radio and on Instagram at Spaced Out Radio Show. We continue on with Kathleen Martin, who has a brand new book updated on the Betty and Barney Hill experience, their experience of being abducted 60 years ago. And it's still one of the top stories out there regarding alien abduction. And Kathleen, thank you so much for joining us. I want to ask you about that, because there are so many people now coming out saying that they have been abducted in the internet age. Yet stories like this one and Travis Walton are still extremely relevant and highly talked about. What do you think causes that with all of these news stories, that Betty and Barney Hill's story is still one of the top ones out there 60 years later?
I think it's because there was evidence. There was physical evidence that's been examined in scientific laboratories, and the evidence is pretty overwhelming. There's also evidence of a cover-up, and I talk about that in Captured. But the Air Force altered its report, and for example, let me tell you, Project Blue Book stated that there was no lateral or vertical movement noted by Betty or Barney. And Betty and Barney, in the Project Blue Book report, it was recorded. The vehicle ascended and it descended rapidly. It swooped down. No lateral or vertical movement. That's a contradiction. But those statements are in the Air Force's report. What the Air Force revised and concluded contradicted what Betty and Barney stated. Another thing, they said that, Betty and Barney probably saw an advertising searchlight that night. An advertising searchlight in a mountainous, sparsely populated area in the off season? Give me a break. That was the most ridiculous one. And then, oh, well, maybe it was the planet Jupiter. Does the planet Jupiter descend to within 100 feet of the Earth? And there are people from Jupiter seen through the craft? No, absolutely not. They came up with the most ridiculous explanations. And then they finally said, oh, it must have been the result of a strong temperature inversion. So I contacted the Mount Washington weather station to find out what the weather was like that night in that area. And they told me no strong inversion. And then I contacted a senior meteorologist who had been working in the field for many, many years. And he went to the weather archives, the National Weather Archives for that area. And he checked this out with two of his colleagues. And they said that it was just the opposite of an inversion, as stated by the Air Force. So there was all this evidence of a cover-up. And on the other hand, you have all of the evidence that it really did happen and that there was physical evidence, and they were seen by Dr. Benjamin Simon. He wasn't just a next-door hypnotist or a stage hypnotist. He was a neuropsychiatrist of high standing. They had the first scientifically investigated case in the United States, and most of the scientists who actually investigated the case believed that it was real. Then, after it was made public, there were disinformants. That's what I'm calling them. Stan Friedman called them debunkers. Well, debunkers take the bunk out of something. These disinformants were adding bunk. They took every part of that story apart and they fictionalized it, adding false information to make it appear that Betty and Barney had only seen a light in the sky, and they became concerned about this light and they drove home, and then Betty had a series of dreams, and because Barney was such a weak person and loved his wife so much, he believed her delusions.
Wow.
And it's the way they changed that story really was upsetting to me as I was investigating and separating fact from fiction. And that's what I did and put down in that book, Captured. And I was going to write the truth regardless of what I found. I was being as skeptical as I could possibly be, trying to destroy the story, attempting to find evidence that it didn't occur. But everything led to evidence that it actually did. And it's all in my book.
For you personally, watching your aunt and uncle go through this, not only is it a tough time because of the politics of the time and them being a very loving, caring racial couple, which was abnormal at the time, but going through what they did politically, going through what they did, with their reputations being attacked by this. I mean, did the family really circle around them to defend their honor?
Well, no one went public to defend their honor. No one in the family, I will say. Stanton Friedman certainly did, and other scientists did, but not members of the family because, we're just a normal family. Farm family in New Hampshire. When that story went public through the Boston Traveler, Betty and Barney, the first night, escaped to Pease Air Force Base for some peace and quiet and to get away from the media. And the second night, they drove down to my grandparents' home, and we met as a family. I grew up across the street from my grandparents. And as a family, we discussed what should we do next. This impacts the entire family, not just Betty and Barney. And so we all agreed that since the cat was out of the bag, that Betty and Barney should speak publicly about this. So a few days later, they spoke at the Universalist Unitarian Church in Dover, New Hampshire, and they spoke only about the sighting and not the abduction. And they were introduced to this overcrowded audience on the first floor of the church. They had loudspeakers on the bottom level, and there were people standing outside the church on a night when it was sleeting. And Betty and Barney were introduced by the public information officer from Pease Air Force Base. There were military people there that Betty and Barney had spoken with as well. And there was an author there that Betty had met at the Exeter Police Station, Exeter, New Hampshire. That was part of her territory as a social worker. She worked in child welfare and adoption. And so she would stop by the police station to check on the wards of the state to see if anyone had gotten into trouble with the police. And that's when she met John Fuller, who was a mainstream author, but he had an interest in UFOs. He had followed, later he followed the Condon Committee, and wrote an article in Look magazine, but this was back in 1968 or so that he wrote that. And it was kind of an expose at how crooked, that's the word I have to use for it, on how dishonest the Condon Committee, not the investigators, but Edward Condon and the others who were leading the program that was being directed by the Air Force, I later discovered, they were launching a cover-up. But John Fuller was the author who was in the audience. He wrote The Incident at Exeter. It was published in early 1966. And Betty and Barney spoke in 1965 at the church, and they finally reached an agreement with John Fuller to permit him to write their story. Now, they would only do that if Dr. Benjamin Simon was involved. And let me tell you a little bit about Dr. Simon. He had been a colonel in the Army during World War II. He had set up the neuropsychiatric unit at the Mason General Hospital on Long Island, where he was highly successful in treating veterans who were returning from the war. They were injured, and he was successfully treating the soldiers who had physiological symptoms, who might have been blinded, who might have been crippled. They could no longer walk. But there was no physical reason for this to be so. It was psychogenically induced by the trauma from the war. And so Dr. Simon developed a special technique through hypnosis where he could control the subject and the individual and what was occurring. In fact, he was so successful that John Huston produced a movie about his work. It's called Let There Be Light. And you would see, for example, a soldier who would be taken into his office. This soldier was blind. And Dr. Simon would treat him through hypnosis and maybe sodium pentothal. And the soldier at the end would still be blind. It didn't help. He would already have said, well, I saw my best friend killed in front of me in the war. And that still did not heal the soldier. So Dr. Simon had a way of probing deeply into the individual's past. And in this case, he discovered that this soldier had received a Dear John letter a couple of weeks prior to losing his eyesight. He had read that letter from his sweetheart who was breaking up with him. And the combination of the trauma from the breakup and the trauma from seeing his friend killed combined to create this physical condition, this blindness for which there was no injury except for a psychological injury. And so Barney was the best. He was the best person for Barney to see, because Barney had developed post-traumatic stress disorder. That's what we call it now. Back then, Dr. Simon was calling it neurosis related to this UFO sighting, anxiety due to this UFO sighting. And Barney ended up having to take a leave of absence from work before he underwent hypnosis, because he had developed bleeding ulcers. He wasn't sleeping well. He was really having a difficult time. He was hospitalized with the bleeding ulcers that couldn't heal. It was a life-threatening event. And so he received the referral to Dr. Benjamin Simon. Betty went down with him in December of 1963. And they had their consultation with Dr. Simon. And Dr. Simon was surprised initially because he thought that Barney was going to be the patient, but Betty said that she would like to undergo hypnosis too. So he devised a plan where he would take them separately. They would drive down together. One would wait in a soundproof waiting room with loud music playing, while the other one was undergoing hypnosis with Dr. Simon. And at the end of each session, Dr. Simon reinstated amnesia. He did that for two reasons. One was that at one time during Barney's sessions, he was so deeply traumatized that he had what is called an abreaction. That's a psychological term for it. He had a great release of emotion, where he was screaming and weeping because Dr. Simon was forcing him to move beyond that point that he had amnesia for, and toward the UFO abduction itself. And I want to say that Dr. Simon, just like Barney, before he had this experience, did not believe that UFOs were real. And then, he would see Betty, and she would have hypnosis too, with amnesia reinstated. So this went on for 4 months, and you look like you want to ask a question.
Oh, I'm always wanting to ask a question.
Well, just feel free to break in.
Yeah, but you see, you're one of those awesome speakers that every time I have a question, as you're speaking, you answer it. So then I'm like, damn it, what do I do now? What do I do now? But no, it's awesome. It's awesome, though, because I'm getting my answers. With the recall that they started having, was it traumatizing to them as to what they learned?
Well, let me back up to the hypnosis where they weren't recalling. They were recalling what happened to Dr. Simon, and he was recording it, but they were going home without a memory. But they started to have nightmares on the night that they would return back to Portsmouth after undergoing hypnosis. For example, Betty had a nightmare that the sky was just full of UFOs and that there was a war going on and bombs were being dropped and there was just utter devastation. So she didn't know what she had told Dr. Simon, but apparently she was undergoing some trauma and some fear that, maybe her life was going to come to an end that night. And Barney was having these sort of nightmares occasionally, too. And so then they underwent 4 months of hypnosis with amnesia reinstated. And then at the end of 4 months, for the next 2 months, they saw Dr. Simon for 6 months in all. For 2 months, he was permitting them to listen to the hypnosis tapes together so that they would know what the other one said during hypnosis and how their statements lined up and where there might have been contradictions. And so there were very few contradictions, I have to say. And so they went through therapy at that point, psychotherapy with Dr. Simon, and also were able to integrate this experience into their consciousness. He was attempting to convince them that Betty had only relived her dreams that she began having 10 nights after the encounter in 1961, and they lasted for 5 nights. She had written a document on her dreams, so she had that, and so you could compare the dream version to what she remembered and what Barney remembered, and that's all captured, the Betty and Barney Hill UFO experience. I didn't line up sentence by sentence like I did with my analysis, comparative analysis of their statements. So you'll get what I learned in the book. But I did a meticulous lining up from the moment they began their trip all the way through until after they arrived home. Barney's speech patterns, Barney's descriptive details. Barney was a person who always thought before he spoke. He thought about what he was going to say, and he spoke concisely. Betty was just the opposite. Betty, something would pop into her mind, and she would describe it in great detail. So they were two different people in terms of the way they processed information and then spoke about that information. Barney was very analytical. He was insightful. He looked inside himself. And he had an IQ of 140. He was a genius. So he did things probably more the way Stanton Friedman would do them. Betty had a high IQ too, not quite as high as Barney, but she just had a different way, a different personality, a different way of explaining what had happened. And in my comparative analysis, I discovered that in Betty's dream material, in those dreams, she described those entities that were in the road as looking very human. They looked like Southern Europeans. They had black hair, eyebrows, ears, human faces, dressed in blue cadet uniforms. That wasn't what Betty and Barney described under hypnosis. They described something else. Betty and Barney both said that, let me back up a minute. In Betty's dreams, she wrote that there were 8 to 11 these human-looking people in cadet uniforms standing on this dirt road. And they did not break into groups of 2. They just surrounded the car and took them out.
Oh.
Under hypnosis, both Betty and Barney said that there were only 7 of them there. They divided in 2 groups of 3, and
Right.
1 remained behind. So you'll read it in Captured, all of this information that correlated.
I'll get you to hold on right there because the Benny and Barney Hill story continues on Spaced Out Radio with Kathleen Martin right after this. Stay tuned. I'm just shivering over here. It's so awesome. So awesome. Oh, man.
They had quite the lives. Unfortunately, Barney died when he was 46 years old.
Oh, that's terrible. Do you think...
In 1969.
Do you think it was from complications of this?
I think that had a little bit to do with it, the stress of all of it.
Right.
But I think also that I know that Barney was injured when he was in the Army during World War II. Mm-hmm. And there was like a percussion accident, a grenade went off, and he had scars on his chest from it. That's how he lost his teeth.
Right.
And, Barney, just, I'm thinking about him and how deeply this impacted him.
Right.
I had a neighbor who was a medical doctor here in Florida, and he was in the Army too, and he was over in Iraq and Afghanistan at different times as a physician, but he was injured in an explosion, and he had a stroke. He was a young man. This medical doctor friend of ours, he was less than 40 years old, I believe, when he had that stroke. Fortunately, he didn't die from it, and he recovered. But the percussion accident then, during the war, it wasn't an accident, I suppose, for my next door neighbor, caused a blood vessel in his head to weaken. There was a weak spot that caused him to have the stroke. Now, Barney had a massive cerebral hemorrhage, but it could have been related to that injury during World War II. I know that when he was released from the Army, he hadn't done his full term of duty. He had done 3 years, and he was in Virginia at Newport News in the hospital, the military hospital there, in fair condition. So he had some injuries previously. He recovered from them and then went to work for the post office. He had on his discharge papers, it said that he was of excellent character. So that was a good character reference. Nice. For him to get that job.
How did they meet? Because back then, everything was still quite segregated.
Well, they met when Barney and his first wife and his 2 sons went on vacation to Hampton Beach, New Hampshire. And Betty was down at the beach, and I think that she met them either at the beach or at the house of a friend of Betty's. Betty had black friends already in Portsmouth, and there was a family who ran a boarding house there. And Betty liked Barney and his wife and the children, and she had said to the 2 of them, well, if you come to Hampton Beach again, if you want to find a place to stay, I keep an apartment for short-term rentals, and I'd be very happy to rent it to you and your family if you come back again. And so the family didn't come back again. Later, Barney and his wife ended up divorcing. They broke up, and he rented the apartment from Betty when he went to Hampton Beach on vacation alone. And that's really how they began talking and really got to know one another. They never intended to marry. They were just friends.
Oh, wow.
Barney knew that Betty supported the civil rights movement. He lived in Philadelphia and had his life down there, active in the civil rights movement. He was a Boy Scout leader in Philadelphia. And so they wrote back and forth, and he would go up and visit from time to time. And, by 1958, I could tell they were in love.
Ah, beautiful. We have just a few seconds here. So we got 5 seconds. So hold on tight here, okay?
Okay.
We pass the halfway point of Spaced Out Radio tonight. My name is Dave Scott. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us. We really do appreciate earning your listening ears. Want to remind you that if you've missed portions of this show or others, check out our free archives by going to youtube.com/Spaced Out Radio. Just do me the favor, hit that subscribe button. Our website is spacedoutradio.com, where we have a plethora of features for you, including rocking out to Bumblefoot and reading up on Captain Shirk's SOR Newswire. Follow us on Twitter @SpacedOutRadio and on Instagram @SpacedOutRadioShow. We continue on with Kathleen Marden. She is the niece of Betty and Barney Hill. It's the 60th anniversary of the Betty and Barney Hill alien abduction. Hard to believe. 60 years we've been talking about this one, and it's still as fresh in our minds as most abductions are. Now, Kathleen has a brand new book out about this, which she's been going through. And Kathleen, we welcome back your wonderful self.
Thank you. Great to be back to tell about this story some more.
I have to ask you, why did you make it your mantra to continue the legacy of this story?
Well, as I said earlier, I was going to write a book, and I was going to tell the truth of what happened, just because I was curious. I wanted to know what the truth really was. And I trained to be an investigator so I could investigate this. I went to the university and read all of the published periodical articles at the university for one summer on hypnosis and the research that had been done, the academic research at universities on all about hypnosis. I then went on and I took training and I became a hypnotherapist. And I wanted to know everything because of my curiosity and because this happened in my family. And I was going to write the truth regardless of what it was. And it ended up that I had an incredible amount of evidence that I could not deny that this did in fact happen to Betty and Barney. And I'm bringing forth more evidence all the time. And it's just fascinating.
How do you find more evidence 60 years later?
Through research. And let me give you an example. Before Stanton died, he found in his files a letter that he had written in I believe it was 1978, to John Luttrell, who was that newspaper reporter. And Stanton said to John, did you ever, during your investigation, find anyone who saw that craft that night? And John Luttrell wrote back and said, yes, I did. I found 12 to 14 witnesses who saw that craft independently that night. And he said, I know it was the same craft because I drew lines from where the witness was to the location of the craft at that particular time of night. And he had talked to the Air Force as well. And so there you have part of the new information in the book. That's all I'm going to say. But there are witnesses that he found, 12 to 14. Unfortunately, Stanton wanted to get his files and John Luttrell's files. At that point, John Luttrell had left the newspaper. He had a new job working as the administrator of a hospital. And he told Stanton that he did not want to get involved in what happened to the Hills again, that he worked for a hospital that was watching him and were wanting to be reassured that he was not going to say or do anything that might embarrass that hospital. And so he was not going to be involved in any of this. And he said that when he left the newspaper, he left his files there and he found out that they had been destroyed.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah, but I have that letter. And that is really good evidence.
So for you and your quest in trying to find new information about this, whether it's eyewitnesses of the craft, whether it's government investigation, what was said, how much more do you feel is out there that you don't know?
I'm not sure. I think that there's probably more on Betty's dress that has not been examined in a scientific laboratory. And as our technology has moved along, then more testing has been done. There is new testing done on her dress with some extraordinary findings that are in the new chapter in the book. And I'm not going to tell you what it is, but I have to say it is a real eye-opener. And I find these scientists because I make it known when I'm working at conferences. I speak before COVID, I spoke all over the United States and abroad. I spoke in Mexico too. I spoke in Canada, and I do radio and television shows. And oftentimes I say to scientists who might be listening that I have established an archival collection at the University of New Hampshire, and Betty's dress is there. And if anyone is interested in doing a scientific analysis on a dress sample, I won't send the entire dress, but I'll send a sample of the dress so that they can do an analysis. So we've discovered new scientific evidence on different parts of Betty's dress over the years that has been, and what we've discovered lately is very exciting.
Well, that's interesting. I mean, goodness, we're going to have to get the book here in order to figure out what those numbers are and what's actually on that. How have you been able to preserve the information? Because, people in the UFO world, whether they're government officials or whether they're researchers, they're like wolves on this stuff. How have you been able to maintain control of the story and of the information and that is out there?
I know this story better than anyone else in the world. I lived it. I investigated it as meticulously and as thoroughly as I possibly could. I have a complete copy of all of the archival records that are at the University of New Hampshire and more, because I interviewed Walter Webb, for example, the astronomer who was the first person who did the investigation of Betty and Barney Hill's sighting. And Walter gave me additional information that he had in his collection. So I've gone to other places looking for information. I went to Philadelphia several times, to the American Philosophical Society. Now, Dr. Donald Menzel, who was a well-known critic of UFO sightings and abductions, was on the board of directors of the American Philosophical Society and has part of his collection there. The rest of the collection is at Harvard University. And you might have heard Stan Friedman saying how perplexed he was because in his information with the Roswell crash, Dr. Menzel was supposedly on on Majestic 12, that above top secret group of scientists and military government personnel who were looking secretly into UFOs. Now, what was Donald Menzel, a debunker, doing on MJ12? And so Stanton went to Harvard University. He had to get permission from 3 people to read Menzel's files. And what he discovered was that Dr. Menzel had a letter in his files to John F. Kennedy saying, "I can tell you more when we are properly cleared to one another." So this was before Kennedy was president, but he was a senator at the time. So Donald Menzel had a higher security clearance than John F. Kennedy, who later became president. And I found out, and Stanton found out as well in our research that we did, that Donald Menzel was very closely connected to government projects and to the NSA and to the CIA. And in fact, in my research, I found out that he was volunteering his services in the 1960s to Project Blue Book, the Air Force's Project Blue Book, to give some kind of prosaic explanation that didn't fit to UFO reports that were being made. And he was also one who spoke out against Betty and Barney's story with speculation, and also Philip Klass, who was an electrical engineer. He'd worked as an electrical engineer. He had a bachelor's degree in it for 11 years. And then he went to work in Washington, D.C. as a writer for a magazine there on aviation magazine that ended up becoming Aviation and Space Technology magazine. And he was a writer and later became one of the editors at the magazine. But he was the most prolific anti-UFO propagandist of the 20th century. And I discovered that it was Philip Klass who had used his imagination to invent a scenario for each part of Betty's and Barney's trip. And he is also the one who reinvented Betty as some kind of UFO kook who was a science fiction fan, who all of that is false. And so I found all of this information at the American Philosophical Society in the archives. I visited John Fuller's archive, and Stanton Friedman went with me, and we read Dr. Benjamin Simon's letters to John Fuller and the letters that Dr. Simon had received from colleagues and others saying, do you want to go down in history as the psychiatrist who hypnotized UFO abductees, or do you want to change your story? And do you want to go down in history as one of the leading psychiatrists of all time? So, these kinds of things were in the files. I found out that Philip Klass had gone to Dr. Simon's house and had spoken with him And Dr. Simon had actually written to Betty and told Betty how much he disliked Philip Klass, and said that he didn't agree with Philip Klass or with Donald Menzel in letters that were in Betty's archival collection. I was the trustee of Betty's estate and the executrix, so it was my job to establish this archival collection at the University of New Hampshire. In order to do that, I had to read every paper in her file. I had to review all of the photographs. I had to do everything and put the important information into her archival collection. So I did a tremendous amount of work, not only through my investigation of her case, but through my research into all of this to find out what was really going on. And beyond captured the Betty and Barney Hill UFO experience, I wrote about this in the third book that Stanton Friedman and I wrote together, Fact, Fiction, and Flying Saucers. So there's a lot more information in that book as well.
Do you think Philip Klass was almost a disinfo agent trying to, shut you guys up, or to change the story to make Betty and Barney look like fools?
Absolutely. And he would always write to people saying, well, I've never been paid. I'll send you my tax forms if you will send me yours. And who wanted to send him their tax forms? So, but in my investigation, I read his FBI record. And in his FBI record, I discovered that in the early 60s, he was in trouble with the FBI and the CIA because he had very friendly with people at the Soviet embassy in D.C. And there was a young man that he was seeing socially and going out on sailboats with and doing all sorts of things with. And the FBI had actually done a raid on Philip Klass's apartment looking for radio equipment that would broadcast into Eastern Europe and the Soviet Union. And so the government is known as doing deals with people who are in trouble. And Philip Klass was in trouble for another couple of things, too. He had revealed classified government secrets in 2 articles that he had written. And the only reason that the government couldn't take him to court was because they would have to reveal the content of that classified information. And so they couldn't. And so I think they made a deal with Philip Klass. If you will work for us, we will make this part of your history go away. But it remained in his FBI record.
Wow. Slimeball City there. Literally.
It is, very much so, yes.
Talk about selling out your career.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Yeah. So I think that's what happened. And he made it his full-time job, in addition to his full-time job as a writer and editor, to debunk every credible UFO sighting and every credible abduction that had been made public, and to destroy the character of the witnesses, who were generally of good character, even police officers. And he did that to Travis Walton. He did that to Betty Cash and Vicki Landrum, who had a close encounter with a craft in Texas. He did that to Lonnie Zamora, who was a police officer in Socorro, New Mexico, who came upon a landed craft. And in fact fiction and flying saucers. I wrote about all of these cases and separated fact from fiction. What the record says, I have the original Air Force records and other investigation records from all of these different cases, and Phil Klass's records. And so I was able to write about, in fact, fiction and flying saucer, case after case of what Philip Klass and Donald Menzel did. I also wrote about the Condon Committee and the trick memo, the famous trick memo, about how to the public it would appear that this was a serious scientific study. But to those scientists who were involved, there was very little possibility of finding a saucer. So it's all in that book, Fact Fiction and Flying Saucers.
We have about 3.5 minutes left with you before we have to go to break at the top of the hour. Kathleen Martin is our guest tonight on Spaced Out Radio. At what point did you start to notice that the UFO world was starting to really embrace the Betty and Barney Hill story?
It was after NICAP. The original investigator, Walter Webb, believed that it did occur. He told me that when I interviewed him when I was writing the book. But there were others in NICAP who officially said that they could not embrace the Betty and Barney Hill case because at that point there was no physical evidence that had been evaluated. And so it was brought forth became more credible with the scientific evaluation of the evidence. MUFON began to embrace the case, and as with Stanton's research into the star map brought the story forward to scientists, and that was in the late 1970s, early 1980s, when he became involved in Marjorie Fish's investigation of what happened to Betty and before the birth. When Betty was on, after her physical was complete and the examiner went to another room, she asked the leader where he was from. And she said, I know you're not from near us. What part of the universe are you from? Was her statement. And where's your home port? And so
that's odd.
Yes, where's your home port? And so he produced this 3-dimensional star map. Funny thing, in her dream, that star map was in the dream, but it was on a pull-down classroom map that from 1961. But in dreams, I later learned that occur just before you wake up in the morning. They often contain real information and fantasy as well. So, there was probably a combination of fantasy and reality in Betty's dreams.
Goodness. Shortly after, as we got about 45 seconds, shortly after this happened, did you start having your own contact or your family?
It wasn't shortly after Betty and Barney's experience, as far as I know. I think it was for the first time when I was 17 or 18 years old, and Barney and Betty were working with a team of scientists. Betty was sending telepathic messages to the ETs, asking them to land on my grandparents' farm. And they did. And my mother and I remembered being taken to Kraft.
Oh my
We lived
goodness.
across the street within 200 feet of that landing area. That craft was observed by 2 individuals. It left physical trace evidence on the ground, and we kept it confidential for all of my mother's lifetime and until fairly recently in my lifetime.
Wow. Well, we're going to talk about that and a lot more as we have Kathleen Marden here for another 30 minutes on Spaced Out Radio. Then we're going to get to the SOR Newswire and the Thought of the Day, a jam-packed hour number 3 of great radio coming to you in the middle of the night. It's because we own it. That's what we do here on Spaced Out Radio. All right, I'm just going to run my dogs outside again. I'll be right back. We have 6 minutes, okay?
Okay.
I love the response I get for Little Brother is Watching from Spaced Out Radio fans. It's amazing how music can inspire and make people think deeper about what's going on in the supernatural world. You can head over to my website, bumblefoot.com, to check out my music, my guitar workshops, my touring, even check out some of the hot sauces that I'm working on. And make sure you keep on listening, because with Spaced Out Radio, you know Little Brother is watching.
The SOR Vault is open for business, and do we have some cool swag for you to pick up? All you have to do is head over to our website and click on the SOR Vault. You have a variety of cool logos to choose from, and put them on anything you want. T-shirts, hoodies, hats, coffee mugs, you name it, we can get it to you. So do your shopping by supporting the store you love. Get your Spaced Out Radio swag at the SOR Vault today.
The party is always on at the Moose Vancouver. The Moose Vancouver is where you want to be when visiting Canada's West Coast. Open until 2 a.m. nightly, the Moose cranks up the rock while serving some of the best rated food in the city. The menu starts at $6.95. Why party anywhere else in Vancouver when the Moose is right there? Get your horns up and rock with the Moose, the official party bar of Spaced Out Radio.
We are scouring the world for the most intriguing stories of your day. Take the time to read up on the SOR Newswire, where our team, led by Captain Shirk, will deliver to you some of the best paranormal and supernatural news, along with some stories that will blow your mind from the weird to the wacky. It's the news outside the news that piques interest, and that's what we're looking to deliver to you. The SOR Newswire, only at spacedoutradio.com.
I'm feeling a little spicy tonight. What to do?
Why not get Bumblefuck?
4 million Scoville units of pure hard rock. Bumblefoot hot sauces come in 3 flavors. The burning Bumble. Tone it down a bit with Bumblicious and throw the sauce on everything.
Spice it up. Bumble me, baby. Bumblefoot hot sauce. Get it today at kajans.com.
We all know on Spaced Out Radio we love a good beard and mustache, so why not take care of your facial hair with Mighty Moose Beard Oil? Made in Canada, we're taking care of beards and stashes around the world. We use 100% natural ingredients with our oils and balms to make your whiskers feel silky smooth. Use promo code SOR2019 at MightyMooseBeard.com today.
Looking for creative ways to get your company out in the public? How about advertising on Spaced Out Radio? Our sales department is waiting to hear from you, and we can work around any budget. From commercial spots to banners to special promotions, there are many opportunities to get your name and product out to our SOR listeners. For a price guide and more information, please contact us at sales@spacedoutradio.com.
Hey, space travelers, this is John Resig, founder of the Chive and Chive Charities. If you know anything about our website, you know we like to do things a little differently. We're not some faceless organization collecting money for a nebulous cause. Our donor dollars go directly toward life-improving items. Then we give those items directly to an underdog who needs it most. To become a donor with Spaced Out Radio's official charity, Chive Charities, just go to chivecharities.org/donate.
Hello everyone, this is Ryan Stacy from the Experiencer Support Association, otherwise known as TESSA. We're glad to team up with Spaced Out Radio to help investigate your experiences on the SOR Sightlines Report. Together, we'll investigate the strange sightings and occurrences you've had. We're looking for answers just like you. So fill out a Sightlines report on the Spaced Out Radio website and let's figure out what's going on together.
All right, I am back. Kathleen, we just have under 2 minutes here.
Okay.
And then when we get to break at the bottom of the hour, just hold off into the break, then I'll say a proper good night to you.
Okay.
Yeah. Makes it easy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I'm getting used to these late night shows. Tomorrow I have...
You got Jimmy tomorrow, don't you?
Yeah, I have Jimmy tomorrow. Yes, and then after Jimmy, I have at 2:30 in the morning a show with a radio station, just mainstream radio out of New York City.
Oh, wow. Look at you.
Yeah.
Look at you. You're going to have to sleep during the day.
I know. I'm sleeping in mornings.
Good.
Tell my husband not to wake me up.
Mm-hmm. I will send him a message.
He's gotten that message from me.
Perfect. Don't wake me up with the alarm.
Yeah, he doesn't set an alarm.
Well, that's good.
So he's been good. He's been quiet, actually. He just goes out and the coffee grinder. I hear the coffee grinder.
Oh,
and
no.
then he sits down at his computer and brings up Facebook, and he reads everything on Facebook every morning. So
well, very
I
cool.
Sleep. He's quiet.
Very cool. We have about 20 seconds. Thank you so much to everybody who has donated to the Super Chat tonight, especially Catfish. Really appreciate that. Fapster. I mean, you guys are just fantastic tonight. Fantastic. Here we go with hour 3.
Would you like to connect with us? Head to spacedoutradio.com for all your latest show info. Now, back to Dave Scott and SOR.
Third and final hour of Spaced Out Radio is now underway. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us. We really do appreciate earning your listening ears. We want to say hello to everyone listening in on our terrestrial radio stations across North America and digitally on TalkStream Live, KPNL, and Revolution Radio. All of our archives are free by going to youtube.com/Spaced Out Radio. Just do old Davey the favor, hit that subscribe button. The Desert Clam has set the password for tonight in the SOR Space Travelers Club. Lacanoscopy. Lacanoscopy is your password. Use it wisely, Space Travelers, as the Clam sets the password each and every night right here on Spaced Out Radio. Our website is spacedoutradio.com, where we have a plethora of features for you, including rocking out to Bumblefoot and reading up on Captain Shirk's SOR Newswire. Follow us on Twitter at Spaced Out Radio and on Instagram at Spaced Out Radio Show. We continue on tonight with Kathleen Martin. We have her till the bottom of the hour. It is the 60th anniversary of the Betty and Barney Hill alien abduction. How real is this? And right before the break, we started talking about Kathleen's own experiences. Now, was this, after your first incident, just the beginning of many, or were you only taken the once?
I was taken more than once, and I have conscious memory of some of it. I've undergone hypnosis. My mother and I first reported it to APRO, to Dr. James Harder, who was the person who was the investigator and hypnotist for APRO. And it was to remain confidential. I only went public because I told some individuals, and they talked me into going public, saying that it would help experiencers if they knew that this happened to me as well. So my Aunt Betty was doing that contact experiment. The craft landed on my grandparents' farm. I've found myself on a table with these entities all around me. I could not remember their faces. I couldn't remember what they looked like. And I remembered that I was there. That was part of my conscious recall. And finally, I remembered in a NAB reaction. And I found it terribly traumatic. It wasn't anything that I wanted to happen in my life. I had difficulty with the memories and was terrified when it happened periodically. And I was trying to prove that it was my imagination. I was trying to prove that it was only a dream. I was attempting to deny that it was real. But then 3 times when I was taken, there were witnesses to the craft. And you just can't deny it when there are witnesses. And then I began to learn how to collect physical evidence. And I did that. And I put, within the past 12 years probably, a game camera in my bedroom. And I started to document how long it was between visitations. And I didn't catch non-humans on that camera, but I did catch, on the day that I was supposed to be taken, based upon what I had recorded and counted out, I had been recording my husband's and my sleep patterns, how often each of us got up during the night, how often we turned, because the camera would record the time and the motion. And so I knew that. And then on the night that it was supposed to happen, I saw him get up out of bed and on the video and go into the bathroom. And he was in the bathroom for 2 hours and 11 minutes. Now, my husband will tell you, he doesn't sit on the toilet for 2 hours and 11 minutes in the middle of the night or at any other time. And he didn't fall asleep. But he was gone. The camera shut off for 2 hours and 11 minutes. And then you see him coming in and getting back into bed. I am certain that I was not completely still for that entire 2 hours and 11 minutes, but there was nothing recorded during that time frame. I don't have a memory of being taken that night. Wish I did. I haven't undergone hypnosis to find out what happened. I've had hypnosis for other experiences. I wrote in the alien abduction files about Denise Stoner. Now, Denise Stoner was the chief investigator in Florida when I moved down here. I met her. She was running support groups for experiencers, and I went to my first support group, and I have to say, it was extraordinarily helpful. I was tearful during the first group when I told what had happened to me, but it helped so much. It just lifted a weight off my shoulders, and I was so grateful to Denise. She knew who I was, but so she invited me to her house for lunch one day, and I went over and she told me about her experiences and how she and her husband had been taken just like Betty and Barney when they lived in Colorado. When they were younger, their daughter was 12 years old at the time. And just an extraordinary encounter with, and I then hypnotized both of them separately, just like Dr. Simon did with Betty and Barney, and reinstated amnesia. And ended up writing about their experiences, more than one, in the alien abduction files. And Denise contributed to that book as well, writing about her memories. She believes that it began when she was only 2.5 years old and has continued throughout her life. She's a generational experiencer her parents were taken, and her sister was taken as well. And one time, Denise and I had gone to St. Petersburg. We both live in Central Florida, but we went to St. Petersburg to listen to researcher Paula Harris, it was, who was there to speak. And on our route home that night, my GPS was malfunctioning, but I knew the route anyway. So after I turned off the road into a desolate area, I said, what am I doing? I'm going to turn this off and just drive on. We know the way. And some odd things started to happen that night. My father was having a conversation. He was in the back seat. Suddenly he became silent. Denise and I were chatting all along the way. Suddenly we became silent. And we had a feeling that my car was going up a steep hill. There aren't any steep hills in Central Florida. There are a few low rolling hills. But the next thing we knew, we're arriving at the parking lot where Denise drove to be halfway between our house. I dropped her off. Her cell phone had gone completely dead, and it had been fully charged. So mine had been turned off. I always kept mine off in those days. It was a flip phone. And so I let her use my phone to call her husband to say that she was going to arrive home late. And she went to her vehicle. When she arrived there, she was wearing an insulin pump, and that was beeping, that it was the battery was dead, even though that battery had been fully charged. And she drove on and arrived home extraordinarily late. My father and I drove on and arrived much later than usual. There was physical evidence in that case, very strong electromagnetic reading on the dashboard of Denise's car. It was malfunctioning. She came to my house for hypnosis. She remembered being on the craft. As she was driving home, she was taken maybe a second time. Her memory was of finding herself in a very strange area, pretty desolate, although she lives in a city area near Orlando. And she saw an orb coming out of the lake. She remembered in hypnosis being taken past a room, and there was an elderly man who was balding on the top of his head, and a younger woman who was wearing the same outfit that I was wearing that night. So it was all very strange. Denise and I then used a tri-field meter, and we tested the meter for the ambient environment. It was just fine on the table, and but what we discovered is we found it was fine when my husband came to try it. With the two of us there, it just in the electromagnetic field went to the highest reading and kept sounding, and we backed away from it and it didn't go back to a normal reading until we were at least a dozen feet away from it. And then one remained behind, the other one walked up slowly as far as we could go without it beeping. That was about 10 feet. Then we called my husband to see if it was malfunctioning. He walked up to it, nothing happened. It was just fine, and just a normal reading. And so then Denise ended up taking it home and tried it with her husband, tried it with her daughter, just a normal reading for the two of them, an abnormal reading for her body. So that made us think about entering an electromagnetic field when you're being taken to craft. And I believe that electromagnetic field, I've talked to 3 physicists about this, and they have told me that this is now about atomic structure. And they have, I said, is it possible to be passed through a vehicle, like the roof of a vehicle, or the windshield of a vehicle, or from the roof of your house, or through a window in your house? And they all told me that theoretically everything is in motion. Everything has a vibrational frequency. And that they said, remember that the atom is 99.9% empty space. And they said, all you have to do is line up frequency or align frequency and phase, and atoms can interpenetrate. And so I wrote about that in the alien abduction files. And so I think that might have happened, and I think that we have evidence that there is an electromagnetic field. We tried this with other experiencers too, shortly after they had been returned. And we had high readings on the tri-field meter in the electromagnetic range. So that was very interesting as well. And so I do think that I was probably taken with Denise, and I was taken again. I had developed chronic fatigue and immune dysfunction syndrome, which back when I developed it, there was a very poor prognosis. There still is. But back then, they weren't certain what it is. Now they know that it is exhaustion at a cellular level, that the cells cannot utilize glucose to produce energy. And I had that disease for many years, and an experiencer in Australia who was communicating with non-humans, he said he was, I didn't believe him really, but I decided to do a test, and he was going to permit me to speak to these non-humans. So I did via Skype, and I said, I think that it was your fault, that I think it was you who gave me this chronic fatigue and immune dysfunction syndrome, and I want you to heal me because I'm having a really difficult time doing my work. And so I didn't expect to be healed. But 4 nights later, I woke up in my bedroom, and there were entities there, and I was taken to craft or to some kind of environment. It didn't look like a regular craft that I saw. It was more like some kind of a matrix environment. And I was on a table, and there were 2 taller kind of glowing beings up by my head. I saw a screen on the wall, and the screen showed probably the outline of my body, and it showed movement of energy passing through the body, and I was feeling a very strong tingling sensation all through my body, and I also was able to see certain organs inside my body that were highlighted, one in pink and one in mint green. And I saw this, and I could feel intense pain in those organs. But when I woke up the following morning, I felt like I was 24 years old again. I had no pain, and I was healed. I have not had chronic fatigue and immune dysfunction syndrome since that day. So now I believe that experiencer in Australia who says that he communicates with council of non-humans and a gray representative from that council. And his name is Paul Hamden. And it is just amazing. And I became interested in other experiencers who have received healing. I actually worked with a man from Canada, from Winnipeg. He permitted me to use his name. His name was Jim Schaefer. And I did a MUFON investigation of his case way back in about 2012 or 13. I think it was 2012. And then he contacted me sometime later and said that he thought he was abducted, and he had physical evidence on his shirt. He had a feeling like he was just totally wiped out. He was trying to capture these things on camera too. He ended up having an implant removed that was investigated by a MUFON scientist, but unfortunately it had dissolved by the time it arrived at the laboratory. I wish that she had, there was some blood there. I wish that she had done a chemical analysis on the blood, but we didn't think of it. She also analyzed a T-shirt he was wearing that he had put into a closet, and ended up, it turned pink over a period of a couple of weeks. And he ended up actually developing cancer. And he was very concerned. And so he was going to ask his non-human entities for healing, and I was going to ask my entities for healing as well for him. And he was able to capture a beautiful baby blue orb entering his home in his bedroom, sliding down the wall, flying like a butterfly across the room, and putting down iridescent tendrils and diving down into his body. He then fell asleep and slept for 12 hours.
Wow.
And when he woke up in the morning, the enlarged nodes on his neck that were cancerous were no longer visible. He had sent me photographs of all of this. It had been wrapping around to the back of his neck. He had been before an oncology team, and he was going to have surgery. He went in for the surgery. He had seen the doctor, and the nodes weren't visible, and the doctor asked him what happened, and he didn't dare tell the doctor what happened, the oncologist. And when they did the surgery, they removed 4 tiny necrotic nodes that were no longer cancerous. So that was pretty amazing, and caught on camera. There was a medical doctor that I had involved in this, Dr. Joseph Burks from California, who was part of the Edgar Mitchell Free Foundation, and yes. I was also a member of that foundation and worked on their study on experiencers. And Dr. Burks believed that this did happen. He saw the video. I analyzed the video. He saw the video. He looked at Jim's medical records and wrote about this in Free's book, Beyond UFOs.
Incredible. Kathleen, we've got less than a minute left with you tonight. And what a special night it's been to have a legend like you on Spaced Out Radio again. I cannot wait for it to happen again. Please do me the favor and let everybody know where they can find your new book.
They can go to my website if they live in the United States. The postage is just too high to Canada. But I am selling autographed copies for people who live in the United States on my website at Kathleen with a K Marden MARDEN.com. You can see where I'm going to be speaking this year there as well, and all of my books will come with autographs, either Denise's and mine alone, or Stanton Friedman's and mine, because I still have some of his labels. And you can also purchase this book, at Barnes and Noble, and Amazon. It's being sold in Walmart. It's being sold at Target stores.
Beautiful.
Yeah. So it's being sold in a lot of retail outlets.
Perfect.
As well. If you can't find it there, you can get it online.
Kathleen Martin, everybody. Coming up next, we have the SOR Newswire and the Thought of the Day. Stay tuned. Spaced Out Radio continues right after this. I'm going to clap for you because that was awesome.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much.
Oh, I'm just so giddy about this, giddy about this. Thank you for a great night here. I really do appreciate it. You are, like I said, a living legend in this field, and anytime you want to speak, I have a microphone to listen, and for our audience to listen. You just let me know.
Thank you, Dave, very much. I enjoyed the interview. Have I done an interview with you on fact, fiction, and flying saucers, my latest book?
No.
No. I mean the extraterrestrial contact. That's my latest book. What to do when you've been abducted?
No.
We might want to do that later in the spring or the summer.
Sure. I'll let Corrence, the booking guy, know to get a hold of you, and we'll get that done.
Okay. That sounds good.
Now that you're used to staying up late, it should be easy.
I intend, after I finish with this month-long, actually it's almost a 2-month-long blitz for publicity for the re-release of Captured, then I intend to sleep again. But I'll get up in the summer for you.
Oh, thank you. We'll talk to you very soon, okay?
Okay. Thank you so much.
Take care. Much love, and we'll see
you.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Okay, how awesome is Kathleen Marden? How awesome. Honestly, Shiny Ray, I told you I was going to do it. I told you I was going to shave just for you. All right. Stetson John, good to see you. To be honest with you, one of the reasons why I shaved my beard was because Shiny Ray has a hearing impediment, and she reads lips. She could not see my lips because of my beard being so overgrown. So that's part of the inspiration that I had to shave my beard, was because I figured if it's her saying this, Shiny Ray that is, that there's probably others there too, out there too, who are having troubles maybe with the show and maybe don't have closed captioning or whatever. So that's part of the reason why I decided to shave my beard. The other part is, I'll be honest with you, I was just sick of it. But Shiny Ray is the one who opened the door to making me get rid of it. Damn it, I have something in my teeth. I got to turn away here for a second. Oh, there we go. I'm going to try and set that up this weekend, Raul. Hey, Terrible Times. What's happening? We got just over a minute. Just over a minute. Thanks, Irish Lincoln. Philip, I may do that. I may do that. Good for you, Tim. Whacked it down, man. Sometimes you got to do that. Thanks, Joey Hayes. Appreciate that. Thank you to everybody who donated to the Super Chat tonight. 6 Hour, Philip Blair, Ange in Australia, Mr. Catfish, Fapster. Oh, gosh, tons of people tonight. I really do appreciate the support. Thank you so much. Let's have a fun last half hour here, and we'll get to it right now. We've rounded third. We're heading for home tonight on Spaced Out Radio. I am your host, Dave Scott. Thank you so much for joining us. Really do appreciate earning your listening ears. Want to remind you that if you miss most of this show or others, you can check out our free archives by going to youtube.com/Spaced Out Radio. Just do old Davey the favor, hit that subscribe button. Our website is spacedoutradio.com, where we have a plethora of features for you, including rocking out to Bumblefoot and reading up on Captain Shirk's SOR Newswire. Follow us on Twitter at Spaced Out Radio and on Instagram at Spaced Out Radio Show. Speaking of the news, the news is always changing, which is why we bring you the SOR Newswire at the back end of every show, where we get to the weird, the strange, the wacky, and sometimes the stinky. In what may not be a media-orchestrated smear campaign, the White House pool reports that a poo incident occurred in some of the nation's more hallowed halls. Many correspondents are saying that a pile of feces appeared on the floor outside the diplomatic reception room on Wednesday, and although not a single witness to the crime has come forward, everyone is sharing the opinion as to who done it. It's either Champ or Major, President Joe Biden's 2 German Shepherds, who were allegedly seen loitering in the nearby hallway before said deuce was found on the carpet. It is admittedly suspicious. It remains unclear which dog was responsible for the droppings incident, but based on the fact that many reports mention a separate first pet scandal in the same breath, some people are saying the wind is blowing towards one of the two. Major, the younger of the Biden's dogs, has recently been sanctioned for 2 biting incidents, or that is the narrative we keep seeing in the press. But according to Jill Biden's spokesperson, Michael LaRosa, the issue really is nipping. Major, who is only 3, nipped someone who is fine, by the way, while on a walk, weeks after he nipped a Secret Service agent. Apparently he didn't like him. According to the president himself, Major, who also happens to be a rescue pup, adjusting to the new environment full of strangers, has been seeing a trainer to work on his behavior. Really, Biden says he is a sweet dog, beloved by 85% of the people, but is getting a bad reputation because he is having a somewhat scary time getting his bearings. You could turn a corner, Biden has explained, of Major's occasionally defensive posture, and then there's 2 people you don't know at all. But as first dogs do, furtive indoor elimination is not actually new behavior, although it can be a sign of canine anxiety in house-trained pets. It can also be a byproduct of aging, and Champ, it bears noting, is 12, but we're not pointing fingers at the old guy just yet. But there was a poo incident in the White House on the carpet. Somebody had to clean up that dookie, and neither pet is coming forward to admit their flaws. Elon Musk announced that he was going to give $10 million to revitalize Brownsville down in Texas, a tiny desert town in the corner of Texas, and another $20 million for its public school system. It was news to the world and also news to the mayor of Brownsville. Unfortunately, at this time, I am unable to give you much information, as we are still not sure about any details. Brownsville Mayor Trey Mendez wrote, "This came as a surprise to everyone yesterday morning, and we have not had a chance to speak with Mr. Musk to attain any information." Brownsville sits at the edge of Cameron County, Texas, whose unincorporated land, meaning there's no city or town government, also houses a massive SpaceX rocket production and launch facility. SpaceX rocket tests regularly jet up over Cameron County and into the Gulf of Mexico. Earlier this year, Musk said that he would be incorporating a town called Starbase, Texas, in the currently unincorporated land, though the county judge told Business Insider at the time that Musk would need to file all the prerequisite paperwork and gain county approval. Musk and Mendez also announced plans for a new Tesla facility and showroom in Brownsville in December 2020. After his donation announcement, Musk, who has already announced his own move to Texas, encouraged people to move to what he's already calling Starbase. He claims SpaceX will be hiring engineers, technicians, builders, and that the region will grow into population by several thousand over the next few years. I wonder if he needs a radio show. Hey, Elon, do you need a radio show that talks about the woo? I know of one. And considering that you have Canadian citizenship too, a fellow Canadian would make the move to Texas to bring the woo to Starbase. Just saying, because I know you got some aliens somewhere. Could future humans evolve to have venom glands? Oh, how cool would that be? In new research, scientists close a long open door by casually linking early salivary glands with what eventually became venom glands in many animals. Because saliva is a common thread, that means anyone with salivary glands could eventually develop venom, from mice in the new experiment all the way up to humans. First, the facts. In this study, scientists from the Oklahoma Institute of Science and Technology Graduate University and the Australian National University sought to answer an old question in evolutionary biology. How did venom glands evolve on animals? Oral venom systems evolve multiple times in numerous vertebrates, enabling the exploitation of a unique predatory niches. Yet, how and when they evolved remains poorly understood. Well, could it end up in humans? Why is venom such a mystery? It's mostly just like scientists haven't studied it en masse, and part of it is because venom is perplexingly common and eclectic. While many snakes employ an oral venom system for securing prey, they are also mammals, such as shrews and other creatures that have evolved oral venom systems based on salivary glands for prey capture and defense. But could this happen to humans? We don't know as of yet, because we're wasting money on this, and really, we don't really need to know, because we are who we are. If it morphs, it morphs, but it's still a couple million years away to have them venom glands. You imagine dating on Twitter? What kind of venom do you have? What kind of venom do your glands have? I don't know. Grizzly bears can run really fast, but not for very long, and they seem to prefer not to. In fact, research shows that bears are partial to the same kinds of hiking trails and walking speeds as humans, despite not being the most energy efficient for their ursine bodies. So, in another useless scientific study that costs a lot of money, where the money could have been used, I don't know, how about for tinnitus? How about for helping cure diseases? No, we're going to measure grizzly bears walking on a treadmill. And then we're going to watch grizzly bears for 6 minutes at varying speeds and gradients to learn that grizzly bears do not like walking uphill. Seriously, people, when we talk about the education system wasting money, grizzly bears on a treadmill. I thought a few years ago when we brought out the story about cougars on a treadmill that was like a $300,000 grant was absolutely ridiculous. Now we got grizzly bears. What is the purpose of this? Well, let's find out from Anthony Carnahan. Our study helps explain why bears would want to use the same types of terrains as humans, so it shouldn't be a surprise to see a bear walking on our trails. Holy cow! How about it's not our trails? We've put the trails in the bear environment, brilliant Dr. Anthony. Seriously, these are the people who are teaching our students today. First, you put a grizzly bear on a treadmill. Then you're absolutely blown away that a grizzly bear would walk on an easy trail that's been carved out by humans, saying that it's our trails when the trails are in their environment? See, stuff like this fires me up. I have no problem with universities. I think universities do great work. Could you imagine this money being studied on what Kathleen Martin just talked about? Instead, we are wasting hundreds of thousands of dollars to watch grizzly bears get tired walking uphill on an incline on a treadmill. Think about that, people. Even if you're not into the woo, okay, that money could be spent on something. I've got tinnitus. My ears ring all the time. Guess what? No cure for it. I would love to see somebody put major money into that because it affects a lot of people. But no, we got to throw money at grizzly bears walking up treadmills and getting tired walking uphill, and us learning that they don't like to walk uphill, but they like to walk on our trails where our trails are on their property. Makes sense to me. Great science there. Great science. We should all be pissed off at that, by the way. We should all be pissed off at that. Seriously. A man in Australia is given one hell of a fright after a massive huntsman spider hurled itself at him. Oh my gosh. Yep, the man was on a holiday in Queensland when he spotted the leggy arachnid crawling up his ATV. He promptly got off and started filming the beast, which was probably about 9 inches long. Yep, crept along the handlebars. That's never a good sign. But the man was wrong to think that he had got away from the supersized spider, because just like that, the huntsman spider decided to launch itself in his direction, prompting him to scream like any of us manly people would do, in a way that most of us, would. Well, let's face it, we hate spiders. They're great for the environment. They are. Okay, I don't like killing spiders because they take out a lot of rodents and bugs. But they're ugly. They're ugly and they're scary. Let's just be honest. Apparently they're not venomous and won't do you any harm. But no, they'll just jump on you and walk all over your face and with their little pinchers on the front. See, when I had my beard, because I shaved my beard, people, all right, I couldn't make that sound. But now that I have no beard, yeah. Arachnologist Dr. Lizzie Lowe said huntsmen don't have very good eyesight. They see light and dark and movement. That's about all. They will never intentionally run towards you because they're small. Small! This thing's like 5 inches long. Oh. No, this guy got freaked out, reacted the way everyone should, and if you have massive spiders, see, this is why Australia is dangerous. The animals will kill you in the water, they'll kill you on land, they'll kill you in fresh water, because that's where the bull sharks are, and the crocodiles. All right? On land, you got the snakes, you got the spiders trying to eat your face. There's a lot of stuff going on in Australia. Those are tough people down there. Tough people. They walk upside down, too, because they're at the bottom of the earth. All right. Minor League Baseball team in Tennessee said its mascot costume was recovered after it was one of several items stolen from an office. Chattanooga police said the costume for Louie the Lookout, mascot for the Chattanooga Lookouts, was stolen Tuesday, along with hundreds of dollars worth of merchandise and other items from a locked office at AT&T Field in Chattanooga. A spokesperson for the team said that the Larry the Looney, is it Looney? Sorry, Louis, the Louis costume was recovered without help by the Tennessee Aquarium. Everyone in the state of Tennessee can now breathe a sigh of relief, said team president Rich Mozingo. We are once again overwhelmed by the support of the Chattanooga community. It was unclear whether the rest of the stolen items were recovered. The Lookouts begin their season May 4th. God, baseball season's finally here. If you could see me right now in Radioland, I have my New York Yankees hat on. And guess what? We start a series with those stinking no good, ought to be tossed out of the major leagues, Toronto Blue Jays. We're going to open up with a sweep. I'm calling it right now. We're opening up with a sweep. It's going to be awesome. God, I love baseball. As much as I'm a hockey guy, at least baseball's pure. It's pure. Not like NHL has destroyed hockey, and Hockey Canada thinks silver medals are good. Gold medals, that's what we need. Don't even get me started on that. Tom Rennie should be fired, Hockey Canada. Tom Rennie should be fired. A Croatian diver broke a Guinness World Record at his own personal record for holding his breath by remaining submerged for 24 minutes, 33 seconds on a single lung full of air. Budimir Buda Sobat, 54 years old, by the way, previously remained underwater for 24 minutes, 11 seconds on a single breath in 2018, but he broke his record during his attempt this month at a swimming pool in the city of Sisak. Sobat's previous accomplishment was not submitted to Guinness, which listed the record for static apnea underwater at 11 minutes, 35 seconds. Oh, this guy destroyed it. Sobat said he wanted to set an official world record for his daughter, Sasa, who's 20 and suffers from cerebral palsy, autism, and epilepsy. Oh, that's a good dad. Good dad right there. The record attempt also raised money for recovery efforts from an earthquake that struck Sisak in December 2020. That's a good man right there. That's a good man. We don't mind mentioning that Guinness record there. Normally they suck, but this one's a good one. 24 minutes underwater. I mean, his lungs must have been burning. Man, I put my face underwater in the bathtub for like a minute and a half, and I'm gasping for air. All right, finally, what would a Canadian story be without a moose, right? Let's go very prototypically stereotype here, even though people in Toronto have never seen a moose before. Literally. Same as Vancouver. They've never seen a moose either. A moose is on the loose in a Quebec City. It went for a run through a residential neighborhood, ended up swimming in a resident's backyard pool. Yes, residents in Sherbrooke said the moose was spotted wandering through a residential neighborhood, and police received a report about an hour later after the first sighting that the moose had fallen into a resident's backyard pool and appeared unable to climb out on its own. 8 officers and 4 wildlife agents responded to the home to conduct a rescue that took just under an hour. I'm surprised it didn't take longer. Moose are big, man, especially in that area. The moose was sedated, so they drugged it up. Rescuers carried it out of the pool on a gurney. They said the animal would be relocated to a forest outside the city. Good for them. Good Canadian moose, nobody hurt, and the moose gets its free trip back to the forest. Thought of the Dave happens every night at this time, where we ask a question on our Facebook and Twitter pages, then read your responses on the air because we love the audience participation around here. Today's Thought of the Dave is as follows. What's your thoughts on the Betty and Barney Hill abduction case? Let's head over to Twitter. Start off with Mark. Their recollection of that night's events are too similar to be made up. I agree with you, Mark. 13 Ballads. Logic says the aliens would have collected data on more than just 2 humans in September 1961. Anybody else come forward in that window of collecting samples and data? No idea. Linda. New evidence in it. All right, that's kind of cool. Let's go to Neil. Feels it's very legit. Having been taken and having encounters since childhood, as well as being empathic, You can just feel that they aren't lying in the interviews, and the trauma is very real. You can't fake PTSD. No one in their right mind would want the attention that you get from coming out on this subject. Robin. The original. Betty even mapped out star systems that were undiscovered at the time. Sylvia. Like you say, Dave, who are we to judge? That's right. Betty and Barney got aliens. John. I'm 50. I wasn't even around when their alleged encounter even took place. That being said, who am I to judge whether or not their alleged encounter was legit or not? I wasn't there, so I can't say one way or the other. Tom Dongo says it's the best one out there. Eugene. Legitimate because I met Barney and Betty in the early 1960s and stayed at their New Hampshire home on weekends in the winter and summer throughout the 60s, and they had been longtime friends of my parents in the 50s. These weren't the sort of people who would seek international attention while crossing the color line of America in the 50s. They were decent, stable, modest citizens before and long after their landmark, terrifying abduction. I filmed Mrs. Hill just a few years before she passed away, and she said it was the longest and most exhaustive interview she'd ever given. She's the grandmother of all alien abductions. Andrew. Barney Hill said one was wearing a Nazi uniform, Dave, so maybe they were alien Nazis working together? I don't think that happened. It was a blacked out uniform, as Kathleen Marden said. Eric with a K, we are his 4th favorite show in the world. We're number 4 for Eric with a K. Was it real aliens or was it a top secret My Lab abduction designed to experiment covertly on human consciousness and mind control? Debbie, the Zeta aliens are the Greys. They've been abducting for a while. This wasn't a staged My Lab case out of deceit. The Greys are very intelligent, can control the environment, and if Barney wouldn't have approached the UFO, I feel they would have been ignored if they would have waited in their vehicle. The Greys are focused on certain individuals and families. My family is one they target. They have a legit story in my opinion, but I feel much was brought on by not listening to the being that telepathically sent Barney a message. Shar, at the time, a mixed-race couple would have never exposed themselves to such scrutiny if it were not true. I think there's merit to that. Angela, I had a similar experience being shown the stars, then finding them. Preston, well, if either of them are still alive, which they are not, could you get them on guess? Well, it'd be kind of tough. Bob, Science Bob, they were original in all that followed from others. And we'll leave it right there. Thank you to everybody participating in the Thought of the Dave on Facebook and Twitter. Thanks to Captain Shirk for a great news wire and firing me up about bears on treadmills. And to Kathleen Martin for coming on the show talking about the 60th anniversary of Betty and Barney Hill's abduction. We got Mr. Ron Bumblefoot Thal rocking in the background with Little Brother Is Watching. Bumblefoot is the official music of Spaced Out Radio, rocking us in and out of every single show. Get your horns up for the guitar god himself. Special thanks to everybody listening in at home, at work, in your cars, wherever you may be. Thank you to everyone checking out our chat rooms tonight on YouTube, LGAB, Revolution Radio, Spreaker, Facebook, the Space Travelers Club, and everyone hanging out on Twitter at hashtag Spaced Out Radio. Remember, this show is copyright by Spaced Out Radio and SOR Media Ventures Limited. Thank you so much for choosing to share your evening with us, because together, my friends, we own the night. Mr. Bumblefoot, we need a favor. We need you to take us home. Yes, the Woo train has docked for the night. But tomorrow, my friends, we shall ride again. Your seats are always available. Your tickets never expire. And if you want to bring a friend, we've got room for them too. Good night.